We hear it all the time. Having high standards is the key to achieving everything you want in life. And even though I 100% agree with that statement, I think in that conversation, there is something very important that we are forgetting to talk about. And that is how having high standards can also backfire. So if you don't do it right, your high standards can leave you feeling even more miserable and frustrated and lonely and isolated. So today, let's talk about what I would like to call the dark side of having high standards. So really, why your high standards might actually be making you even more miserable, how to recognize if your high standards are working against you instead of for you, and then also, most importantly, how to actually create the kind of high standards in your life that truly empower you and improve your life and your experiences. As always, if you enjoy my content, feel free to support it in some way, such as liking, commenting, or subscribing. Also, I'm so excited to share that you can now download my free 12-minute guided meditation. I created it specifically to help ease feelings of anxiety, and the link will be in the description box below. When you have high standards, you know what you deserve. You don't accept being undervalued. You don't tolerate things that are not good for you. You don't entertain one-sided dynamics. All of those things are clear, and all of those things are good things. But I think the key understanding that we seem to miss in this conversation, which is where things start to go wrong, is that actually, if you think about it, there are two types of high standards you can build in your life. High standards rooted in trauma and high standards rooted in self-love and self-respect. And even though those two might look similar on the surface, they are not the same thing, and they will most definitely not have the same effect on your life and your confidence, and also the experiences that you manage to attract into your life. You know, I think for a lot of us, this journey of realizing that we want to build higher standards in our life kind of plays out in a similar way. And for me, I find it kind of goes like this. So step one is you move through life with low standards. So you are accepting things that you should not be accepting, maybe because you are a people pleaser, maybe because you don't know that you deserve better, or whatever reason you might have for operating this way. Step two, eventually you wake up to the reality that these low standards have led you to some really painful, unhealthy, and maybe even damaging situations. So you start to realize, wait, this is actually not what I want for my life. For me, that step kind of felt like my whole life had turned into a big episode of what was I thinking across the board. Step three, you decide that you need to start raising your standards. But here's where things often go wrong, or things get a little bit tricky, because you are probably just coming out of whatever painful situations have been a result of your previous low standards, whether that was heartbreak, disappointment, betrayal, pain, whatever it was. But because you are just coming out of those painful experiences, and they are probably still fresh in your mind and in your body, now your focus becomes less about deserving better and more about protecting yourself. So now, coming out of that, you start thinking, oh my God, I need to start building higher standards because I need to protect myself from ever having to relive the pain of my past. Or I need to start having higher standards because I need to guard myself. And if I don't guard myself, people will use me and abuse me and disappoint me in the way that they have in the past. And that's when you start building higher standards rooted in fear and anger and trauma. But the truth is, even though those trauma-rooted high standards, we're going to call them that, even though there's still high standards and people from the outside might not even be able to tell the difference, those high standards will never empower you and give you the kind of confidence that you can get once you start building high standards rooted in self-love and self-respect, which is a totally different journey. An example that I can share from my own personal life, which I think really shows the difference between these two types of high standards and the effects that they will have on your life, is that once I was also in that step 2, where you are waking up to the reality that you need to start having higher standards. And one of the many areas of my life that I was looking to work on were romantic relationships, because I knew that my previous low standards in that area of my life had led me to some really painful and unhealthy situations. And I knew that I wanted that to change, and I didn't want to repeat that cycle. So here's the thing. When I first started that journey, my desire to start building higher standards didn't come from a place of, you know what? Actually, I deserve better. It came from a place of, I am never, ever letting anyone treat me like that again. That's it. Because I was just coming out of whatever painful experiences had been a result of my previous low standards in romantic relationships. So now when I went back into the world of dating and meeting new people, and I went in with the intention of having higher standards this time, I, from that energy, also went in with my guard all the way up. And so from the outside, it might have seemed like now I had really high standards because I knew what I wanted. I wasn't tolerating anything that was not good for me. I was not entertaining one-sided dynamics. I had no issues to walk away. All of that was there. But at the same time, I also felt hyper aware of seeing those things that people might do wrong and finding those red flags. I felt continuously anxious. I was continuously questioning my own judgment. I had this underlying continuous fear that I would lower my standards again, and what would happen if I do. Like, I was always aware of never wanting that to happen again. And in that chaos and that fear and that anxiety, I was also, at the end of the day, pushing most people, or pretty much everyone, away. So now, even though I felt like I finally had those high standards that everyone keeps talking about, and I was finally not compromising them, they still didn't make me feel confident and secure of myself, and they didn't allow me to actually invite new experiences into my life, because at the end of the day, I wasn't actually building higher standards. I was just building walls to protect myself. And so at the core, trauma-rooted standards are all about control, and they are driven by fear and sometimes even anger. And because of this need for control that causes them, they might make you feel like you are finally in control, but they will also make you feel isolated in relationships because you are continuously hyper aware of spotting red flags. They will also make you feel lonely because at the core you don't really trust anyone, or you struggle to trust anyone. They will make you feel stagnant because you will be pushing away all your opportunities for growth, because no job, no person, no opportunity will ever be good enough to match your unrealistically high expectations, which are driven by this fear of not wanting to relive your past, which will not allow for you to actually create a new future and actually invite new experiences into your life. And they will also make you feel emotionally exhausted because you are continuously on edge, over analyzing every situation, overthinking all the time. And so, yeah, you will finally have those high standards that you've always wanted, but they will also make you feel even more miserable and isolated and lonely. Self-love or self-respect rooted standards, on the other hand, are a whole different story, because they will make you feel even more confident and sure of yourself and free and happy. And I really think once you start building those types of high standards, they will get you to everything you want, everything you deserve, and everything you could have ever dreamed of, really. So how do we actually start building high standards rooted in self-love and self-respect? Easier said than done. And so when I was writing down my notes for this video, I wrote down a few examples of the shift that I think needs to happen here. And so let's quickly read through those examples together. So for example, when you have trauma-rooted high standards, your energy will be in this idea of nobody can be trusted and I have to protect myself from everyone. Meanwhile, when you have self-respect rooted standards, your energy will be in I trust myself to choose who I let into my life, and I protect myself by choosing relationships and opportunities that align with my values and needs. So the difference to understand here, which is kind of what this whole episode has been building up to, is that trauma-rooted standards are all about control. Meanwhile, self-love or self-respect rooted standards are all about trust, more specifically, your trust within yourself. It's less about controlling other people and more about you knowing and trusting that you can handle whatever situation comes your way. That way, your high standards won't just be keeping out the people you don't want, and then you end up being lonely and miserable and isolated and alone, but you will also allow new people into your life who will actually match those new high standards of yours because you trust yourself enough to choose the right people who get access to that part of you and your life. Or another example, when you have trauma-rooted high standards, your energy will be in this idea of if I open up, I'll get hurt and I can't rely on anyone but myself. Meanwhile, when you have self-respect rooted standards, you're in the idea of I trust myself to rely on the right people and to walk away if someone isn't dependable. So the conclusion is building high standards that actually improve your life and elevate your life isn't just about knowing what you're no longer willing to accept or knowing how to walk away. It's also about doing the inner work in healing and rebuilding that trust within yourself, which is going to be the foundation of those high standards that actually bring you everything you want, everything you deserve, and again, everything you could have ever dreamed of, really.